The sun had barely risen when the car rolled to a stop in front of the rundown house. A small, weathered home with peeling paint, half a fence, and a porch light that still blinked from the night before. The German Shepherd, his coat brushed to a clean shine, sat proudly in the back seat. His tail thumped against the upholstery as he looked at the children through the window, expecting another fun morning walk. But today felt different. The kids didn't get out. The man, his owner, stepped out of the car, opened the back door, and clipped on the leash with rushed hands. He didn't look the dog in the eyes. The German Shepherd tilted his head, sensing something was off. Normally, there would be cheerful commands. "Come on, Max, let's go." But today, silence. The man walked him to the porch, unclipped the leash, and without a word, turned away. He didn't pat the dog's head, didn't ruffle his ears, didn't even glance back. Max stayed seated. He stared after the car, ears perked as the engine started. Surely it was just an errand. A short trip. The door had been left cracked open behind him. Surely someone would come out, call him in for breakfast, fill his bowl. But the car rolled down the gravel driveway and didn't return. By noon, the sun was hot. The bowl beside Max, once gleaming with fresh water, was empty. The kibble dish was dry, still holding a few crumbled pieces from the night before. Max didn't touch them. He stood up and paced the porch, nose twitching. The screen door remained, closed. No footsteps echoed from within. He barked once, then again. He scratched at the door lightly, then lay back down, placing his head between his front paws. Still, he waited. That night, the air grew cold. A light rain began to fall, soaking the steps, seeping into the old doormat where Max had curled. His ears twitched with every distant sound, car doors slamming, dogs barking down the street, a garbage can tipping, but none belonged to his family. He dozed fitfully, waking every hour, lifting his head each time headlights passed the front yard. Each time his tail would wag softly, just in case. And each time, it stopped. The first neighbor to notice was Mr. Patterson, an elderly man who lived across the street. He'd seen the family leave early that morning and found it strange they hadn't returned. He shuffled to the edge of his porch, squinting through the drizzle at the dog. "Max?" he called, unsure of the name. The shepherd looked up but didn't move. "Poor fella," he muttered, stepping back inside. By the second day, the food bowl was overturned. Max hadn't eaten anything. Rain had filled the water bowl, but the dog licked at puddles more than anything else. He lay in front of them, door again, unmoving, a perfect silhouette of loyalty. Two girls on bicycles paused at the edge of the yard. One of them called to him. "He's still here," she whispered. "Do you think he's okay?" He looked sad. Max didn't lift his head. The girls pedaled off, hearts heavy but uncertain. On the third day, hunger gnawed at his belly. A cramp ran through his side, but he didn't move far. He left the porch only once, circling the perimeter of the house, sniffing near the trash cans. But there was nothing. The bins were empty. The scent of his family lingered faintly on the doorframe, the porch step, the corner of the house. But already it was fading. He returned to the bowl, staring at it blankly. He didn't understand. The nights grew colder and a bitter wind swept through the cracks in the porch wood. Max curled tightly, nose to tail, but his body trembled. He pressed his back against the wall beside the door where a faint scent of warmth and safety still lingered. Each day he watched. Each day he waited. By the end of the week, Max's ribs were showing beneath his coat. His once polished fur had dulled and collected dust and grime from lying on concrete and dirt. His eyes, still alert, carried the weight of confusion and longing. He didn't bark anymore, didn't pace. He simply stared at the road. That was when the mailwoman noticed. She'd driven past the house several times that week, wondering why the mailbox was stuffed and untouched. This time, she stopped and leaned out of her window. "Hey there, pup." Max blinked at her. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. She frowned. "Are you alone?" She parked her truck and approached cautiously, hands out. Max raised his head but didn't bare his teeth. He didn't want to scare anyone. He was just tired. So very tired. "Where's your family, huh?" she murmured, kneeling near the steps. "You've been sitting here for days." Her heart cracked when she saw the bowl, dry, cracked. A line of ants trailed from it across the porch. She left quickly, but came back 10 minutes later with a can of dog food. The tab cracked, and for the first time in days, Max stirred. He didn't lunge. He didn't gobble it down. He simply approached slowly, cautiously, as though still unsure if he was allowed to eat. She watched him for several minutes before leaving, a note on the door and calling animal control. But even they didn't come that day. Max didn't run when cars passed. He didn't chase squirrels. He didn't even react when other dogs barked nearby. His world had shrunk to the length of the porch and the sound of tires he hoped would be familiar. The bowl remained outside. The door remained shut. He didn't know how long it had been. 1 week? 2? The days blended into one another. Sleep came in fits. The cold grew worse. But still, he waited. Because sometimes, even when everything else is taken from you, food, warmth, comfort, the hope that someone loves you enough to come back is the last thing to leave. And Max still had hope. Each morning brought a flicker of hope, a memory more than a belief. The way the gravel used to crunch under the tires of his family's car. The particular sound of the back gate swinging open. The unmistakable jingle of keys as the kids rushed through the front door. For Max, those sounds had meant love, routine, warmth. Now they haunted the silence. By the 10th day, the porch had become his entire world. His bones ached from sleeping on the hard wood, his legs stiff when he tried to stretch. His stomach groaned, more from emptiness than hunger. The mailwoman hadn't come again. The bowl remained, but now the rainwater inside had a thin film of dirt and fallen leaves. The food, if anyone had left any, had long been picked apart by birds. People passed by, some slowing to look, some whispering. But no one stopped. Inside the house it remained dark. No lights flickered on, no shadows moved behind the curtains. Max had stopped scratching the door. It hadn't opened the last 50 times. Why would this time be different? Yet still he waited. Because hope, even when starved, doesn't die easily. A group of teenagers passed one afternoon laughing too loudly, throwing rocks at a tree. One of them tossed a bottle cap toward Max. "Stupid mutt's still here," one said. Max lifted his, head weakly, flinched but didn't move. The cap rolled to a stop near his paw. Another boy hesitated. "You think he's okay?" "Looks like a ghost." They left without answers. Later that day, a neighborhood woman named Rosa approached. She lived 3 houses down and had seen the dog on and off for over a week. She carried a grocery bag in one hand and a container of rice and meat in the other. Her own small dog walked beside her on a leash, wary of Max. "Hola, cariño," she said softly, setting the container down a few feet away from the bowl. Max sniffed the air but didn't stand. She crouched and watched as he slowly dragged himself to the food. He didn't eat like a starved animal. He chewed slowly with caution, as though still waiting for someone to stop him. "You poor thing," Rosa whispered. Her dog whined. Max glanced at them, then back at the door. He still thought his family would return. By the 2nd week, his fur had lost all its luster. A wound on his leg, probably from a scrape on the fence, had begun to fester. Flies buzzed around it. His eyes, once deep pools of alertness, dulled into a flat stare, always fixed on the driveway, on the road beyond, on the world that had taken everything from him. Rain came again, harder this time. Thunder rolled above, and Max, once a protector who would bark bravely at storms, now trembled beneath the porch's overhang. The world had become too loud, too cold, too uncertain. The empty bowl filled again with rainwater, and he drank from it because he had no choice. He dreamed fitfully of warm rooms, of belly rubs, of his boy laughing, tossing a ball. He would wake suddenly, tail thumping once in his sleep, only to open his eyes to the familiar ache of loneliness. That same night, animal control finally arrived. It was nearly midnight when a white van pulled up to the curb. Two figures stepped out with flashlights shining beams across the house, the yard, the dog on the porch. Max didn't move, not even when the net pole was brought out. "He's still here," one of them said. "Doesn't look aggressive." "Too weak to fight," the other replied. "God, how long's he been out here?" They moved in, slow and cautious. But Max didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He just blinked as they looped a gentle leash around his neck. When they let him off the porch, his legs buckled once. He steadied himself. Still, before they loaded him into the van, Max turned back, just once, looked at the door, waited a beat too long. Then the door closed behind him forever. At the shelter, it was warm, too warm. The lights buzzed. The air smelled like bleach and fur and anxiety. But Max didn't protest. He didn't bark like the other dogs. He didn't even wag his tail when a kind volunteer reached through the kennel bars with a treat. He lay down on the cold tile floor, resting his chin between his front paws. His eyes stayed open. Shelter staff read his intake form aloud. Male German Shepherd. Approx. 3-4 years old. Severely underweight. Mild infection in left hind leg. No ID chip. No collar. No known name. He had a name, though. They just didn't know it was Max. He wasn't aggressive, just silent. He let them clean his wound, inject him with antibiotics, let them feed him soft food and bring him warm blankets. But his gaze never changed. He wasn't present. His body was there. But his mind was still back on that porch waiting. A volunteer named Jenna took notice. She'd been working at the shelter for over 5 years, and there was something in Max's silence that crushed her. Not apathy, not even fear, just abandonment. Deep, echoing abandonment. On her break, she sat outside his kennel. "Hey, handsome," she whispered. "You've been through something awful, haven't you?" Max looked at her but didn't move. She offered a biscuit. He didn't take it. She sat with him anyway. Days passed. Other dogs were adopted. Puppies came and went. Some cages stayed empty. Max's didn't. Every evening, Jenna sat with him. She talked softly, read books aloud sometimes, even played music. Anything to break the silence. One day, as she was flipping through a photo album she always carried of shelter success stories, she left it open on her lap. Max stirred. His nose twitched. He stood slowly and walked the few steps to the bars. His eyes rested on a photo of a boy and a black Labrador curled on a couch. He stared. It was the first time he'd moved voluntarily in nearly 2 weeks. Jenna noticed. "You had someone," she whispered. "You loved them." Max blinked slowly. Then for the first time in the shelter, he sat tall, like he was remembering who he was. She wiped a tear and whispered, "I'll find you someone new, someone who won't leave. I promise." The days rolled by in a rhythm Max couldn't name but instinctively understood. Morning brought the clanking of food bowls and the howling of kennel neighbors hoping for a walk. Afternoon meant volunteers in brightly colored vests, carrying leashes and checklists. Evening carried a strange stillness, broken only by the quiet shuffle of exhausted workers cleaning up. Max no longer waited at the gate of his cage. He simply watched. Not with hope, not yet, but with the exhausted endurance of someone who had learned that expectation too often ended in pain. But something was shifting. Jenna had kept her promise. Every evening she returned with the same calm presence and gentle voice. She never forced affection, never demanded attention. She simply sat, read, sometimes played recordings of children laughing. Once she brought in a sweater that smelled faintly of lavender and childhood. She laid it in the corner of his kennel without a word. Max sniffed it once, cautiously, then turned away. But the next day, he lay on it. It was that day that Jenna noticed the smallest change. He didn't flinch when she entered the kennel. He didn't move, but he didn't retreat either. She crouched near him and waited. When she offered a biscuit, one of the same liver-flavored ones he had always ignored, he hesitated, looked at it, looked at her. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and took it from her hand, not greedily, delicately, as if accepting it was a test of something fragile and long forgotten. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. "Good boy," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. That night, she wrote his name in marker on the whiteboard near his kennel. Max. It wasn't official, but somehow it was right. The next few days brought a quiet kind of blooming. Max began to stand when Jenna approached. He started following her gaze when she pointed to things, a sign of curiosity returning. He sniffed at leashes but still didn't let anyone clip one on. His tail, so long still and low, gave the slightest twitch. When he heard Jenna's voice, the vet staff noted his improvement. The infection in his leg was healing. His appetite returned in small bursts. His weight was creeping upward. But still, Max remained reserved around others. He tolerated the medical care, endured the baths, but his eyes searched for one person, Jenna. One crisp Saturday morning, Jenna arrived with a different kind of energy. She seemed nervous, hopeful. A man and a teenage girl followed her, both carrying leashes and treat pouches. The girl had a calm presence, a soft smile. The man had kind eyes and strong hands. "Max," Jenna called gently. "I brought some friends today. They'd like to meet you." Max stood uncertain. The man crouched from a distance, staying low and quiet. The girl sat on the floor just outside the kennel, carefully avoiding eye contact, respecting Max's space. "We're the Harpers," the girl said softly. "I'm Ellie. That's my dad, James." Max tilted his head. Ellie pulled something from her hoodie pocket, a squeaky ball, old and worn. She didn't throw it, just placed it on the floor between them. Jenna opened the kennel gate but didn't reach for Max. She gave him the choice. Minutes passed. Then, as if drawn by some long-dormant instinct, Max stepped forward. He sniffed the ball, then sniffed Ellie's outstretched hand. She didn't move. Max gave a soft huff and looked back at Jenna. "It's okay," she said. "They're safe." Max turned again to Ellie, then gently nudged her fingers with his nose. James let out a soft exhale. "He's beautiful." The visit lasted over an hour. Max didn't play, not really, but he stayed near them. Let Ellie stroke his head. Sat beside James. By the end, he was curled at Jenna's feet, eyelids heavy. As the Harpers prepared to leave, Ellie knelt beside Max. "We'd love to bring you home, big guy. No pressure. Just think about it." The next day, they returned. This time, Jenna clipped a leash to Max's collar. He didn't fight it. Outside, the sun was warm and the breeze soft. Max's paws touched grass for the first time in weeks. He sniffed the air, alert but unafraid. Ellie tossed the squeaky ball a few feet away. Max watched it bounce. Then, with slow but sure steps, he chased it. Not a run. Not yet. But it was the first time he'd moved toward something with purpose. The shelter erupted in quiet celebration. Staff who had watched Max decline now gathered in silent awe as he took those tentative steps into his next chapter. 3 days later, the adoption was finalized. Max walked out of the shelter beside Ellie and James, tail swinging low but steady. He had a new collar, a new leash, and a new name tag that simply read, Max. Loved. As they drove home, Max rested his head on Ellie's lap. She stroked his ears gently, whispering stories about the house waiting for him. A backyard with soft grass, a bed by the window, a kitchen that always smelled like pancakes, a family that wouldn't leave. Jenna stood on the curb long after the car disappeared. She wiped a tear, then smiled. You did it, Max. And somewhere, in the back seat of a quiet sedan, Max exhaled for the first time in a long while, not in fear, but in peace. The flicker of new light had become a spark. The ride home was long, but Max didn't mind. Ellie's hand was gentle against his fur, and the car's hum was a comforting rhythm, like the beat of a heart that understood him. He sat on the back seat between Ellie and her father, his legs still a bit stiff from the kennel and the long days spent pacing alone. But there was something new now, something heavier than the weight of his past, and lighter than the burden of his hunger, the presence of his new family. He didn't fully understand it yet, but it was there, pulling him forward, urging him to trust. The empty bowl, the endless waiting, all felt like echoes of a life that no longer existed. As the car turned down a narrow street, Max's gaze flicked to the window. Houses with neatly trimmed lawns passed by. The scent of flowers and freshly cut grass filled the air, and for the first time in years, Max felt a strange pull toward the unknown. He wasn't sure what this place was, or what it meant for him, but it felt like the beginning of something important. When they arrived at the house, Ellie stepped out first, opening the back door and giving Max a warm, encouraging smile. "Come on, Max. Welcome home." Max hesitated for just a moment, then, guided by the soft tug of the leash, he followed her out of the car. The front yard was larger than anything he had ever seen, wide and open, with patches of sunlight slipping through the trees. He took a few tentative steps, sniffing the air with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. Every scent was new, the grass, the flowers, even the dirt beneath his paws. It was a sensory overload, but there was comfort in it too. Ellie's voice was soft but full of excitement. "You're going to love it here, I promise." Max stopped, uncertain. His tail wasn't wagging yet, but his body felt lighter, freer. Ellie knelt in front of him, placing the leash in her hands with a gentleness that spoke volumes. She didn't rush him. She just let him be. And for the first time, he felt no pressure to perform or pretend. No one was asking anything of him. He could take his time. The first few hours in the house were spent quietly. Ellie showed him the living room, where the couch was soft and inviting. Max wasn't sure what to do with the strange new object, so he circled it several times, then lay down on the floor in front of it. He wasn't yet ready to climb onto the cushions. The house had a different smell from the outside world, a mixture of wood, warmth, and a hint of something sweet, like baked treats. His stomach rumbled, but he didn't feel the hunger he once had. Instead, he felt safe. Ellie spent the afternoon moving around the house, unpacking groceries and putting away her school bag. She checked on Max every few minutes, her eyes full of affection. "Want some water, buddy?" she asked, holding out a bowl. Max sniffed it but didn't drink right away. He wasn't sure why, but it felt too early. There was still too much space to cover, too much history to leave behind. James, Ellie's father, had been in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner, but he came in quietly to check on Max. He smiled when he saw the dog curled up on the floor. "He's doing great," he remarked. "He just needs time." "I know," Ellie replied, her voice thoughtful. "It's just, he's been through so much, Dad. I don't want to rush him." James nodded, his expression gentle. "No one's rushing, sweetie. Let him settle in. He'll get there." As the day passed, Max began to explore more. He padded down the hallway, his ears pricking at every sound. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the rustling of papers, and the soft ticking of the wall clock. There were new smells in every room, but nothing felt threatening. The house was quiet and calm, a place where he could breathe. Ellie and James took turns giving him space, watching from afar, observing his reactions. When it was time for bed, Ellie led him upstairs to her room. She had set up a soft bed for him next to hers with a blanket she had folded into a neat pile. Max sniffed it, then lay down cautiously, curling up into a tight ball. For a while, he didn't sleep. He lay with his eyes open, listening to the sounds of the house settling around him. But eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a deep sleep. The next morning, Ellie woke up early, as usual. She glanced over at Max's bed, half expecting to find him curled up tight, still unsure. But when she looked closer, she saw that he had moved. He was sitting by the door, his eyes focused on something in the distance as if waiting for something to happen. Ellie smiled softly. "Good morning, Max. Want to go outside?" Max blinked, then stood up, his body still slightly stiff, but no longer hesitant. Ellie opened the door and the warm sunlight flooded the room. He stepped outside, taking in the sights and smells of the backyard. There was a small patch of grass where he could lie down, and a tall tree that provided shade. The yard stretched out before him, with the promise of freedom and comfort. He walked around cautiously, sniffing the ground, then took a slow lap around the garden, his paws brushing against the cool earth. Ellie watched him from the porch, her heart swelling with affection. "You're doing great, Max. Just take your time." Max stopped near the fence, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He paused, ears alert, and then, almost as if he were testing the limits of his newfound home, he sat down. His gaze softened as he looked at Ellie. It was a quiet moment, one that spoke volumes. There were no more chains, no more empty bowls. There was only the soft grass beneath him and the warm, steady presence of a family who had promised to love him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the life he had known before, but it was real. It was the beginning of something better. And for the first time in so long, Max felt a flutter of hope, the kind of hope that came from being seen, being wanted, and, most importantly, being home. As the days passed, Max's transformation continued, slowly but surely. Ellie made it her mission to help him feel at ease, making small but significant changes to his environment. Every morning, she was there to greet him with a soft voice and a gentle touch, guiding him outside to explore the yard. Every evening after dinner, Max would sit by her feet as they watched TV, the two of them finding comfort in the shared silence. Ellie's father, James, was equally patient with him, giving Max space while also showing him kindness through the simplest of gestures: a scratch behind the ears, a bowl of fresh water, and an occasional treat. Though Max had yet to fully embrace the idea of play, he was content with the quiet moments they shared, and that in itself felt like a gift. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Ellie decided to take the next step. She had spent weeks trying to help Max trust again, showing him that not all humans were like the ones who had abandoned him. But she knew the next step was vital. She had to show him that love was not just about survival. It was about bonding, about creating a new family. So one Sunday afternoon, she grabbed Max's leash and led him to the local park for a walk. It was a sunny day and the park was alive with families and children playing, but Ellie's focus was entirely on Max. At first he hesitated, unsure of the open space. He sniffed the air cautiously, his tail slightly tucked, and his body stiff, as he observed the other dogs running around. Ellie bent down, speaking softly to him. "It's okay, Max. You're safe here. Just let me lead you." Max's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time Ellie saw a spark of recognition. He wasn't just following her physically, he was beginning to follow her emotionally. With slow, deliberate steps, he began to walk alongside her, his eyes focused on her, his trust deepening with every passing second. They walked together side by side for nearly an hour. Max still didn't interact with the other dogs, nor did he play with the children running past. But he stayed close to Ellie, his steps more relaxed with each moment. By the time they headed back to the car, he was walking at a steady pace, tail wagging gently, ears up. It was a small step, but it was everything. For the first time, Max wasn't just surviving, he was starting to live again. Back at home, life continued to unfold with a new rhythm. Max grew accustomed to his routines: morning walks, mealtime with Ellie and her father, and afternoon naps in his new bed. He even started to curl up beside Ellie when she read her books, the gentle sound of her voice no longer an unfamiliar thing, but a comforting presence. There were still moments of fear, moments when he would flinch at loud noises or cower at sudden movements, but each time, Ellie and James were there, reassuring him, helping him to see that the world didn't have to be a place of hurt. Slowly but surely, Max learned to trust again, And then, one day, something happened that marked a true turning point in Max's journey. He found his voice. It was the middle of the afternoon when Ellie heard a soft, uncertain whine coming from the living room. Max was sitting by the window, his eyes fixed on the front yard, his tail wagging nervously. Ellie, who had been cleaning the kitchen, walked over and knelt beside him, noticing that he seemed to be waiting for something. She sat next to him, her hand gently stroking his fur. "What is it, Max?" she asked softly. "What's bothering you?" The whine came again, this time louder, and as she looked out the window, she saw it. There, standing at the edge of the yard, was a neighbor's dog. Max's eyes locked onto the dog, and for the first time, he didn't back away in fear. Instead, he stood tall, his body language showing a mix of curiosity and determination. The dog barked once, and to Ellie's surprise, Max barked back. It wasn't the aggressive, frightened barking she had heard at the shelter, but rather a tentative, inquisitive sound. He wasn't just reacting, he was engaging. Ellie's heart swelled with pride as she watched Max. "You're doing it, Max," she whispered. "You're learning to communicate." Over the next few days, Max's behavior continued to evolve. He no longer shied away from other dogs during walks, though he still preferred to keep a safe distance. He began to explore the house more freely, sniffing around corners and investigating rooms he had once avoided. He even started to play with a chew toy Ellie had bought him, though at first it was just a cautious nibble. Slowly, however, he began to show more enthusiasm, his tail wagging furiously as he tossed the toy in the air, his joy echoing in the room. By the time his first full month in his new home came around, Max had become a different dog. He had gone from a creature of instinct and survival to a dog who sought affection, who gave love without hesitation. He would follow Ellie around the house, sitting quietly by her side when she worked on her homework or folded laundry. In the evenings after dinner, he would snuggle beside James, resting his head on his lap while they watched TV. It wasn't just the physical care that Max had received, but the emotional support. What Ellie and James had given him wasn't just shelter, food, or medical care. They had given him a family. They had given him love. One night, as the family sat together, Ellie reached down to pet Max, her hand running through the soft fur on his back. Max was lying on the floor at her feet, his head resting on the ground, his body fully relaxed for the first time in weeks. It was clear that he had finally come to terms with the idea that he was safe, that he was home. "Max," Ellie said, her voice soft, "you're part of our family now. You don't ever have to be alone again." Max looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers, and in that moment, something incredible happened. He didn't just look at her, he gazed at her with an understanding that spoke to the depths of their bond. His tail wagged once, then twice, as if to confirm what she had said. He was home, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense. From that moment forward, Max became more than just a survivor. He became a beloved companion, a cherished member of a family who had given him the second chance he had been waiting for all along. And as the days turned into weeks and then into months, Max flourished, no longer waiting by an empty bowl, but living each day surrounded by the warmth and love of the family who had chosen him.